This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski.
You thought the twists in the Delphi case were over. Think again, because the latest court filing is a full-on legal thriller. Richard Allen's defense team has accused the state of Indiana of withholding exculpatory evidence, which they have in the past. They just go into great detail this time. Specifically, letters from an inmate suggesting that someone else confessed to the murders. Now, withholding evidence isn't just a legal issue, it's a psychological game, too. What happens when prosecutors consciously or unconsciously start believing in their own version of events so much that they suppress facts that don't fit? Is this just negligence, or could this be something deeper, like confirmation bias on steroids? Joining us today is psychotherapist and author Shavaun Scott, an expert in this area, to help us unpack this from a psychological angle. Shavaun, when we see a pattern of behavior here, of withholding evidence in cases like this, which we've seen a lot in this case, is it always about winning at all costs? Is there something more insidious happening in the mind of someone involved? And I'm not specifically trying to single out McClelland or anybody in this. I'm just kind of talking more broadly. When you're on that one side of a case and you got to see it out, your job is to prosecute this. How easy do you think it is for prosecutors to get into that, blindsidedness and just completely ignore facts that are potentially exculpatory for a defendant?
Wouldn't this be a good research study if somebody could figure out how to do it? How often does that happen? Because we've seen in other cases that it does happen, that whether it's conscious or simply confirmation bias, where they believe a story and then evidence be damned, that comes up to contradict it. There does seem to be a mindset of winning, regardless of what facts may say. And, we've seen it over and over again in different cases all over the country, and it's really disturbing.
It is disturbing because, you want to think, that people who are in these fields, if you're a prosecutor, that you are going to be, handling things on the up and up. If there's something exculpatory about a case, you're going to want to put it out there, especially if you don't have anything in the fight, which you shouldn't if you're the prosecutor on the case, or if you're a defense attorney. That's where you recuse yourself from it because it's too close to home. You could have a bias there. But if you supposedly don't have any sort of bias, how do people get into that state where they just keep going down a road where there could be an innocent person that's going to go away for the rest of their life, or has gone away for the rest of their life, because you just didn't like the facts. They contradicted where you thought it should go.
Yeah, I think we run into the fallibility of the human mind sometimes. And we do tend to like, just speaking of all humans, we like stories. It simplifies life for us, to get a version of what we think the truth is. And we see this playing out in our political system. We see it all over the place, right? People's beliefs about healthcare, medicine, vaccinations. It's like, I have a story. It makes me feel a certain way. I like the sense of, that I've got the truth, and I'm going to stick to it regardless of what the facts say. And I think it's a human fallibility.
Excuse me. I had something to say, and then I breathed in, and I got to take a sip of water. Stand by, kids.
Okay.
That's interesting. The simplified life, where that is how we like to take things. It's how we like to perceive things. It's easier to digest. If things are more complicated, it makes my life more complicated. And people don't like complicated situations as a whole.
Yeah.
Is that a human thing, or is that more of a cultural thing, depending on where you are in the world? Is that an American thing? Or is that something that we see in other areas as well, as strong as we do here, this desire for oversimplification, but it's more so a desire for the idea of things being oversimplified, even when they truly are not?
Yeah, it's comforting. I think it's a human thing. I think we're kind of wired that way. Our brain lets us take shortcuts that makes life in many ways, at many times, more efficient. But unfortunately, it's not always based in reality. And that's when we see problems. But I think it's just part of the human mind to do it that way. Have a simple narrative, have a shortcut, and even when there are contradictory facts, oh, well, I just don't see that.
What happens, though, in a community like Delphi here? And I know this sort of stuff happens, all over the country. This Delphi is the one we're talking about. When the public sees repeated instances of withheld evidence, if you're paying attention to the case, you'll find that because it's there. It's not like it's up for debate. There's so many things in this case that McClellan, the prosecutor, and the state and Gull and all that have just basically denied or said, nope, not important. You got to trust us. You got to trust us. It's not important. Mm-hmm. If you're of one mindset and things are usually a little bit more complicated than just what they are, you want to know the answer. Well, why are you reacting this way? Why are you withholding this? Or why has this not come to light? But then you have a whole other set of the public that's like, no, they did their job. They did it right. And they just seem to have blinders on. And, as I do sometimes, you stick your fingers in your ear like a child and go, la, 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 la. I don't want to hear it, but it's still there. And these are adults. These are people that live in these communities. Let's talk about that. I mean, the mindset that it takes to be over here going, let's get more informed and let's figure out what's really going on here, versus it's much more comforting just to say we got somebody and now I can sleep better at night. Facts be damned.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first one on wanting to be more inquisitive. What is the difference in that person versus the other? Why is there such a difference in one's mindset versus another?
And that's another interesting thing about, the differences among people. How many people are really critical thinkers? And that's another personality quality that I think you develop with it or you don't. And some people just like to put more thought into things. And sometimes when you have a community, they reinforce each other in this kind of tight-knit setting where everybody's telling themselves and other people the same story. And so it just becomes more in their minds, the fabric of their reality.
Are we in a place where we have fewer critical thinkers than we did in the past? I mean, has that number dropped? I don't know if there's any study to that, but it sure feels like it. It sure feels like we're in a place where the groupthink really takes over a lot faster than it ever did in the past because we have more platforms to do that with. And it just seems like it's a lot quicker to go down a road and people convince themselves that they are critical thinkers when they're really not thinking of anything critically at all.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And they don't see their own blind spots. And I do think that, the way we can choose the media we consume at this point, whether it's on the internet or however else we connect with people, it tends to be reinforcing. So, when what we click on in the news is what we get more of, and people then get the same story, it reinforces it. They're around other people who believe the same way. It would be interesting if we could measure over time, has it gotten worse? My guess is it has.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. What about a defendant in a case like this? Here we have Richard Allen, 130 years in prison now. Unless something magical happens, that's got to be incredibly difficult if in fact he is innocent, to constantly have what appears to be just a barrage of lies flying at you. That people are sitting there stacking evidence in certain ways or omitting evidence in certain ways. There's a lot of that in this case to benefit their narrative. And obviously he was sitting there in solitary confinement for 14 months, basically being tortured. And then he comes out a totally different person, admitting to the crime in ways that really don't make any sense. But the prosecution hangs their hat on that. That's got to be something that could really screw with your mind, if not break your mind, could it not?
Yeah, yeah. And I think he came in with a history of depression. He's a vulnerable person anyway. And I would think, I can only speculate, not knowing him, but I think anybody would be impacted tremendously. And if you're vulnerable, that could be the factor that contributed to his clear psychotic break. And not only confessing to the killing of the girls, but also that he killed his grandchild, which he doesn't have. So as I always say, a psychotic confession is not a real confession, and it's just tragic. And I think he's probably given up all hope at this point and just accepting that this is his awful fate.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking and it's horrible to try and wrap your mind around some of this. When we look at some of the people in this case specifically that were pointed out very early on, like the Keegan Kline character specifically, that's the one that very much baffles me. And I don't quite grasp how prosecution got into the hole that they did of not exploring him further and exploring Ron Logan further, especially when you have the FBI going, this is a little interesting over here. And then you have evidence that continues to come out. Granted, what we're talking about right now would be the confession letters that were by Rishi Davis that basically state, here's what he told me, here's what Keegan said to me, here's what Ron Logan said to me. And it has so much information on there that no one else would know other than the actual killer. And there's a shocking amount, far more than I was even aware, that are in some of these letters that are in that new affidavit that is coming out. When you have all that new information and you're the prosecutor, and it's right in front of you, how do you still have the blinders on when it's your job to try and find justice in a case like this? Why would you not? Is there any logical motivation to not go down roads that could exonerate someone or just go where reality is if you don't have some sort of, iron in the fire here other than just your ego? That's, I think, the big question with this case is, if you're to give your conjecture, do you feel that this is something where people are battling for their egos and what they've already said and done, or are they battling for something bigger, for something else? Are they covering for something else? And it's just pure speculation. Because there's a difference, I think, sometimes, if it's battling for ego or battling for out of fear because the system or something bigger than you over here that's saying, this is the way it has to go. Don't say anything else.
Yeah, it's got really scary possibilities, and it's hard to understand. I mean, we always were raised to think that the justice system, the court system, was about getting to the truth. And we know after looking at cases over the last few decades, and certainly with DNA evidence where so many people have been exonerated, that the system doesn't really work about getting to the truth. That's what it's supposed to do, but it really doesn't. And so is there something even more nefarious going on here? I think we're going to be speculating about that for a long time, if not forever.
Are we into a place where ego can really rule the day more than it did in the past, where yes, we have rules, we have laws, we have things where it's like, okay, the judge should rule on it this way if this is what's going on. But now we have cases here where, facts be damned, rules be damned. And it's not just that people, and I'm not making any specific accusation here, but people in these places of power sometimes now seem to be like, well, yeah, I know that's the trend, or that's what we have been doing through all of eternity of how we handle this, but I'm not going to anymore. And you know what? There's no guardrails. There's nobody here that's going to accost me or penalize me in any way, shape, or form if I don't do the job the way you think I should be doing the job, or the way the job is described to be done. People in places of power, and look, we're seeing it obviously on a much larger scale if we're talking about our country as a whole and just rules being broken left and right. Are we seeing a lot more of that on a smaller level, on local levels where, yeah, we have rules in place, but there's no guardrail. There's nothing to hold power to accountability in so many places anymore. Or maybe there used to be, but we don't have it because people were just kind of doing things the way they were supposed to for a long time, but not anymore.
Mm-hmm. My guess is it's always been a problem and we were just not aware of it. I can think of cases going back many years where I don't think justice was served, because of things that have come to light in the future. But yeah, it's not the way that it's supposed to work. And when we have a system where there's supposed to be checks and balances, but nobody's checking and nobody's balancing, what exactly do we do other than try to keep shining a light on it, just as you're doing?
And I wonder about that because now we have a world where far more people can shine a very bright light on things more than just a big media organization that decides we're going to do this story tonight at 10. You have, us. You have tons of people like us that are out there that, okay, we're all going to do this and it's going to be like an invasion of lake flies because there's so many of us just, covering these same things. Maybe that's a good thing at this point in time. As much as people will criticize, everything's over dissected. Maybe that's good because the people in power that used to be held accountable or should be held accountable aren't doing it anymore. So now it's almost like a citizen uprising on some of these cases of you're not doing your job right. So in some ways, maybe there is more accountability, but is it where it matters?
Right. I think that it has to be consistent. It has to be loud. It has to go on, indefinitely, and hope that it eventually will do some good. And it's hard to know, but I think you're right. I think we do have more of a voice now. And of course, that also means that crazy people have more of a voice too, but
that's true.
That's all we can do is keep trying to put the truth out there, or put in place the voice of reason and the voice that's always saying, what, we can't just swallow a single story, particularly when facts indicate otherwise.
Craving non-stop true crime updates? Press subscribe now and get the latest cases, analysis, and expert commentary delivered straight to your feed. Only from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.